And we are almost done, just 2 more problems left. I just want to reiterate for numbers 13 and 14, I'm looking for several things. I need both angles, and they need to be positive. So I'm focusing more on, for number 14, the theta one that's 347.4. I can give you partial credit if you get this far. I'm also looking for your terminal side. Did you draw the angle where it's supposed to be? Numbers 15 and 16, very, very similar, but we are now in radians. So you should automatically go to your calculator, change your mode to radian mode. Oops. Now that we've done that, looking at number 15, I can't type it in the way that I see it. Sine is okay, I have a sine button, so I'm not going to take any reciprocals or anything. But I need to rearrange this so there's no equals in between. Well, I'm solving for theta, so I need to separate theta and sine. To separate two things, you use inverse operations. So we're going to use the trig inverse, or take the trig inverse of sine. The sine inverse of the value, negative 0.6257. The way that's written, I can type that into my calculator. Once I've changed my mode, I just type it in. Second sine, to get to sine inverse, of negative 0.6257. Looks exactly like what I have on my paper. Okay, hit enter. I get a value of negative 0.6, how many decimal places? 100th of a radian. So that's 2 decimal places, so 6, 8. And that's in radians. To figure this out, you could determine the values of your radians around the circle. You could change to degrees. I like to stick with radians so that I don't confuse myself too much. So I know that the positive x-axis is 0. I know that the negative x-axis is 3.14 or pi. So I'm trying to figure out negative 0.68. Let's see. That would make this a negative 3.14. And the first dot, if it's negative, we're going clockwise, so that would be negative pi over 6. Negative pi over 6 is negative 0.52, not at negative 0.68 yet. The next one would be negative pi over 4. That's negative 0.79. Okay, so negative 0.68 is between those two values, pi over 6 and pi over 4 in the negative. So I would draw my reference, my terminal side between these two. I know that this distance is 0.68 radians. However, if you look at the instructions, it says it has to be positive between 0 and 2 pi. So I need to figure out all the way around. If I went to the closest x-axis, I would be at 360 degrees. But we're not in degrees, we're in radians, so 2 pi. I would be at 2 pi. But I'm not quite at 2 pi, I am less than 2 pi by 0.68. Whoops. Let's get those lights back on. Okay. I'm less than 2 pi by 0.68, so I'm going to subtract that. And I'll actually do 2 pi minus 0.68, and I get 5.60. That is my first radian, so 5.60 radians. To figure out my second side, because it says values, plural, terminal sides, plural, multiple, I need to look at the value. I notice that it's negative. Sine is focusing on the y. Y is negative in the fourth and the third, so it's not first or second. Using the fact that the unit circle is symmetrical, I know that it's going to be between these 2 points here. I know that the distance to my x-axis is 0.68. So to get to my terminal side, my closest x-axis is pi. But I'm beyond pi. I'm going past it. I'm going past it by a distance of 0.68. So I'm going to add 0.68 radians. And I get 3.82 as my second theta. So I have my two terminal sides. I have my two values of theta. That's what I'm looking for. Got them both. And both the values of theta are positive. For number 16, all right, I see that it's secant. I know that secant doesn't have a button on my calculator, so I need to rearrange. What do I know about secant? Well, secant of theta is 1 over cosine of theta. And these are values, remember. Which means that the value of cosine of theta is 1 over secant of theta. If this is the value of secant, cosine is 1 over that. So cosine of theta is 1 over negative 3.5824. I can't leave it the way it is like that because I can't type it into my calculator like that, so I need to rearrange. Separate cosine and theta using inverse operations. Take the cosine inverse of both sides. So theta is the cosine inverse of 1 over negative 3.5824. I can type it into my calculator like that, no problem. So cosine inverse, second cosine of 1 over negative 3.5824. Hit enter. They give me a theta 1 of 1.85 radians. It's positive, so I'm going to keep it the way it is. I just need to figure out where that is. Now 1.85 radians. All right, so we know that we start at 0. We know that if it's positive, positive, it's going around this way. So that's positive 3.14 over here. So not over to the negative x-axis yet. What's halfway? Pi over 2. Pi over 2 is 1.57. I'm at 1.85, so I know I'm going to be beyond the positive y-axis, the 90 degrees. So I need to figure out these. This angle right here is 3 pi over 2. I'm sorry, 2 pi over 3. First dot is 2 pi over 3. What is that in decimal form? 2.09. So I already know that if I want 1.85, I'm going to be between these two values. Now this one gets a little bit tricky because this distance here is 1.85. I need a reference angle. Reference angle goes back to your x-axis. So I need this angle right here. To figure out this angle, let's do this in pink. So reference angle right here, it's going back to the pi axis. And how much left of pi is there if I've already used 1.85? So pi minus 1.85 is 1.29. So my reference angle here is 1.29. Why did I do pi minus that? I need to figure out what two angles together will get me to pi. Because if I've already gone most of the way, what's the rest of the way? Most of the way is 1.85. The rest of the way to 3.14 is 1.29. So if that's my reference angle, I'm going to use that to figure out the other angle. To figure out which quadrant it's in, I notice that it's negative. Secant is the reciprocal of cosine. Cosine is represented by x. X is negative. in the second and the third quadrant. So it's not in the first and it's not in the fourth. It's going to be symmetric. So it'll be about here. I know that this distance to my x-axis is 1.29. To go all the way around, I'm going beyond the pi axis. I'm going from pi, or from 0 to pi, and then I'm going to go even further by 1.29. So pi plus 1.29 gives me 4.43. And that's it. Again, so for these ones, I'll just reiterate during your test, but I'm looking for 2 values of theta and 2 terminal sides. You don't have to cross off the ones that aren't being used, but it helps me so I don't draw it in the wrong spot. Reference angles are very important. This one is the most tricky because you're not given your reference angle, you have to find it. Remember, if they give you a negative theta, you need to change it to a positive. Find a coterminal angle to that negative theta. And please make sure your calculator is in the correct mode. I can't give you any credit if you give me way off answers. So first things first, always make sure you're in the correct mode. I'll make sure that I write that on the test. And if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email, asnow@killinglypublicschools.org. You can look for more information on the school website, on my teacher webpage, or you can come after school Thursday to do some test corrections and test review. So I'll see you then. Good luck.